Now let's say I wanted to do a cool fade in right here. Right now, it just cuts from black to video. It's not a smooth transition. It's nothing fancy. But in the video class, they'll tell you that these aren't necessarily bad things, because in movies, real movies that you watch, you'll notice they don't spend much time like focusing on transitions. They don't do fancy transitions from scene to scene, or someone's having a conversation, they don't take the time to do a fancy like mosaic flip, to change from person to person. All those fancy effects that you learned about in PowerPoint aren't really applicable, and you'll probably actually even get docked points if you use too many of them. So just be careful. The safest one that I've found to use is a fade in and a fade out sort of a dealio. So let's say I want just a little bit of a softer fade in right here, because this is the beginning of our video. Because we already drug this up here, this is the video we're working with. Let's just make sure our cursor is on here so we can see it over here in our window, because over here in our source, we're going to click on Effect Controls. So we're not in Source anymore, we're in Effect Controls. And now we can't see what we're doing, except our preview window kind of turns into our rough draft window, or however you want to say it. So there are, if you come over here in your project window, you can go over here to effects and video effects and transitions. There are a whole bunch of options you can choose from, but these are kind of the cookie cutter effects that you kind of want to stay away from if you can. So I'm going to click back over here into my effect controls window, and I'm going to use my left and right arrow keys again to get to the very beginning of my clip. You see how it goes black if I hit my arrow key 1 there? So I want the spot right where my video comes in. I'm going to come down here to opacity, and I'm going to click this drop down arrow. And I'm going to add, oh, I just lied to you actually. Okay, so I want it to fade in, let's go back to the beginning of my clip and see what time it's at. So my clip starts at 4:28. I want this to be a 3-second transition. So I need to go find 7:28. And a 3-second transition is actually kind of long. You probably don't want it to, let's just do a 2-second one. 2 seconds is still kind of long. You see how this is taking up most of my clip? We probably want the transition to be done way over here so we can actually watch the clip and not worry about the transition itself. But to show you how this is done, I'm going to make it a 2-second transition. So I'm going to put this where I want it to be fully faded in at 100% opacity. And over here I'm going to click this diamond right here that says add a keyframe. Now we have that keyframe, and it's going to remember that right here we want our opacity at 100%. Okay? Now I'm going to drag this guy back to the beginning of my clip at 4:28. Remember, if we click back 1, it's black. We're going to add another keyframe right here, but this time we're going to click on the opacity percentage. You see how that little hand with the arrow pops up? And we're going to drag left. We're going to click and drag all the way down to 0. So now it knows, this keyframe tells it right here I want it at 0%, but by the time you get to this keyframe, I want it to 100%. So now if we hit our spacebar, it'll fade in. And then hit your spacebar again to stop, or it'll just keep going. But you can see down here in the timeline, as we did that, you see this line right here? That's like the progression of our opacity. And technically you could change it down here if it's not where you want it, or you wanted it to be a little less faded in. But working with it up here gives you so many more options, and you can look at the nitty-gritty details, that you should try and keep it up here in your effect controls as much as possible. So now, let's say we want to fade out. It's basically the same concept. We're going to come over here, we're going to find where our clip ends. I'm going to use my little left and right arrow keys. So it's black at 10:15, but the video is still there at 10:14, right? So 10:14, let's take this back to 9:14, so it's a nice 1 second fade out. I'm going to add a keyframe there, so it knows we're still at 100% at this keyframe, but then we're going to scroll down here to the end. We're going to add another keyframe, but we're going to take it down to 0%. So now, if we watch our full clip, it's going to fade in, we're going to have our wonderful clip, and it's going to fade out.